would say cannabis is quite unique, and I would say it's a little bit more challenging in that it is a new industry. But I always say no is the second best answer. Like I'd rather hear no than I want to hear yes, then I want to hear no, then I want to hear silence or anything else or maybe or whatever, because the timing's got to be right, your heart's got to be in it, your team has got to be ready in terms of software, to utilize a product like ours. So it's very difficult.
All sell that ends sell. Sales is a dark art to many, but particularly in cannabis, it has to tread carefully between customer expectations, market limitations, and of course, wildly varying legislation. In this episode, Brian Roth, head of international sales at Elevated Signals, helps pull back the curtain, showing us how someone slinging cannabis's ancillary products needs to tackle the particular complexities of the cannabis industry to get deals done.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Lobsterpot podcast. I'm Dave Barton, the co-founder of Thermador, and here is my other co-founder, Jamie Bonteron. How you doing, sir? 9 o'clock in the evening? We're doing podcasts, but living all right.
Absolutely, we're kicking in a later shift today for our lovely guest, but that's quite all right. It's nice to mix it up a little bit and save them all being sort of mid-afternoon. So it's a nice change.
Well, it turns out a lot of the really influential people in the cannabis sector are based on the West Coast. And one of them here today is Brian Roth, who's the head of international sales at Elevated Signals. So hello, sir. Welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself for those who don't know you and what you guys do at Elevated Signals.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. So I lead international sales efforts. So Elevated Signals is a Canadian software development company. And so international being everything outside of Canada, including the US, based out of Northern California. And of late, that has included opportunities outside of North America. But in short, Elevated Signals is cannabis production software. And we help operators with real-time access to information at their production facility, as well as the record keeping and opportunities for data utilization, for things like audits, quality audits, QA, QC programs, so on and so forth. But yeah, in short, we're a software company making the lives of cannabis producers easier.
It's a nice way of putting it. How did you tumble into the world of cannabis, Brian?
You know what? I've been in ad tech sales for a majority of my career. And the gray hair perhaps can give you some insight into how long that's been. But I was doing that for a long time, and I actually followed a team that I had worked with into this is going to sound funny, but into the virtual reality industry. I will say not into virtual reality. And was working in that industry, and as adoption didn't quite take off, kind of was thinking about what good uses of virtual reality could be, what use cases there are out there, and thought about selling kind of the technology into hospitals and whether or not I wanted to do that, and figured that wasn't really for me, and was thinking about other kind of benevolent ways to help people that are ill. And emerging markets, nascent industries, kind of hit me in the face that cannabis was it. So started sniffing around the software landscape, or the investigating software companies serving the industry. And after a few stops, landed at Elevated Signals.
Very nice.
Cool.
Very nice.
I was going to say, do you feel like software within the cannabis sector is any different from software in any other sector? Or is it just kind of a case of it has a very specific set of criteria that you're monitoring? Or could it foreseeably, because again, I always think that, you see a lot of products these days, it's, cannabis specific this, cannabis specific that. And I know a lot of that has to kind of do with compliance, but it's a genuine thing, isn't it? It's not just a kind of, hey, we'll just take a product, slap cannabis on it and, sell it as a cannabis specific. What you guys offer and what a lot of companies offer is something very kind of specific to the needs of the industry.
Yeah, well, I think cannabis is really an opportunity for manufacturing software in general to be disrupted, where you've got some of the large ERPs or enterprise resource planning products from the likes of Oracle, SAP, et cetera, that are just big beasts of products, and it's hard to make those work for agile and kind of dynamic production practices that take place in cannabis. And there are a lot of companies that are trying to port software that was built for other industries into cannabis. And I've seen that firsthand, and that has proven incredibly difficult. And so, really you see the best software for cannabis producers is purpose built, but it is very nimble as the regulations are changing, the taxes are changing, and the practices are quite unique from one operation to the other, whether that's the existing software systems are using, whether that's the unique processes that they go through. So, I think that it's really a good opportunity for manufacturing in general, no matter what the product is, for cannabis to really, kind of force the disruption of production software and manufacturing execution systems or manufacturing resource planning tools.
And when we look at the way that cannabis works, and that a lot of it, because it is so nascent, is really starting up or scaling up. And you said that a lot of these organizations that are out there, probably some of the ones you're working with, are really agile and really dynamic, and they're out there, taking day by day. They don't necessarily have the resources in place to be able to have a whole team of people responsible for something. Do you think there's maybe a not lack of skill, but lack of education or understanding around how to work with these kind of types of software in the cannabis sector? Do you go into an organization and there's just guys and girls in there who are great at growing cannabis, but maybe aren't necessarily great at the other elements, and that's maybe where you need to do some hand holding? Is that something you found?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of conflicting interests, at these operations, because you'll get guys that have been, or gals that have been growing, for ages, that are not necessarily tech savvy and, kind of know how to grow incredible ganja, but yet, using technology or systems might not be their forte. And then more recently, and I think this is a good thing, you'll have guys coming in from Fortune 100 companies, major CPG, consumer packaged goods companies, that are accustomed to kind of these very robust, advanced software tools, such as an ERP, and they want everybody at the operation to use that. And then you get to somebody, at the farm or at the grow, that's trying to use that to record data or use it for production, and it just doesn't work. Whether it's the lack of technical savviness of that team, or whether it's the inefficiencies in entering the data into the ERP, or whether it's that ERP not being flexible or needing a lot of customization in order to work for the particular practices of that operation, the SOPs, the processes, et cetera. So a lot of forces there. And that's not even to mention getting into a quality assurance or quality control team that has got a quality management system. So how does the QMS system fit into all of that? And does a purpose-built cannabis production software product, does it have some of the elements of each of these systems? So yeah, it does require a lot of hand-holding, and frankly, it's really exciting because every conversation is unique. We're having a lot of conversations about data architecture, digital transformation. What do your systems look like? What are your priorities? Because each team's got different priorities and different challenges. And, I think that's why Elevated Signals has been extremely successful. Just to kind of toot our own horn here for a second, is that kind of onboarding and customer success and hand-holding, account management, whatever you want to call it. Do you have people that know what they're talking about, that have worked with a lot of different organizations, cannabis organizations? Have they worked with organizations similar to yours in your country doing the same things that you have done? I think that's why we've really been successful, is our team exceeds at making sure that digital transformation and the implementation of systems goes well.
Yeah.
So it's been exciting.
And again, I mean, we work with our sister companies who are with a lot of sort of tech brands, sort of SaaS platforms and things like that. And it's always a challenge when you're talking to people who've kind of implemented a new system or something like that. When it comes to people, it's kind of like, yeah, you have experts who can kind of do the technical implementation, but unless you have someone who can appeal to the hearts and minds of people who are going to be using the system day in, day out, that requires that's equally as important a skill set when onboarding. And I guess in the cannabis sector, it is that authenticity. They need to know that you're not just here selling a software. You're not just a suit. You understand, you care about the sector. You're part of this as much as they are, And so I guess in that respect, you feel like the opportunity now is to kind of build, cannabis sector from a digital perspective up the way that you want it to build from scratch. Is it kind of almost like there's a kind of level playing field, or there was maybe a few years ago, that you can kind of say, okay, well, we've seen this work in other parts of IT. We can do this straight off the bat in the legal cannabis sector.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, we can do that. One comment just in terms of the consultants, it's really interesting. We obviously have a very solid and strong partner network of folks that are making introductions for us. And it was very interesting, the consultants that want a referral fee for making introductions and the consultants that don't, and say, all right, I'm going to make the introduction, but then they're going to make the decision as to whether or not they want to work with you. I can recommend a few software companies, but that's always, I find that very interesting, the model that the consultants take. But it's nice to work with folks that know what they're talking about. And it's certainly challenging because if the hearts and the minds of the operators and the people that are using the software aren't sold on the advantages and don't know exactly what their ambitions and goals are in terms of using the data and automating the collection of data, it can be quite challenging for us.
Absolutely. When I first spoke to you, Brian, I was really interested in getting you on the podcast because of your sales background. Primarily, that was the thing that really was a real draw. And we got chatting to you, and having worked quite closely with salespeople in the past, they're a specific breed, and it takes a certain kind of person to be able to do it. And I mean that in the best way. It's a very difficult thing. It doesn't matter what you're selling and where you're selling it. Ultimately, you're knocking doors, whether that's online or offline, and that can be a difficult thing day in, day out, because you're gauged very much on the success or the lack thereof, whereas in other roles you don't have that sort of pressure. Do you think there's anything particularly challenging about sales as a broad idea in cannabis that you haven't seen in other industries, or is it exactly the same, it's just a different product?
I would say there are definitely some differences and some similarities. When I go back to my ad tech days, and I was calling on ad agencies, and you're not sure if you have any familiarity with that, but it's the same kind of thing where you're buying shoes for these junior folks at ad agencies, and we're buying them jeans or taking them to the spa or whatever it is, and trying to win their business. So that was kind of unique. But cannabis, it's a grind, no doubt about it. And there are obviously many aspects of sales in the cannabis industry. So, while I'm selling software, there are guys out there selling hardware, scales, flour, nutrients, consumables, et cetera. There are guys selling insurance. There are guys selling ways to improve your utility bill because you're being overcharged. And then there are the guys that are brand sales people that are, going into retailers in the US trying to get shelf space. And that is incredibly difficult. Whether it's because of who they're selling into and the procurement folks and purchasing managers at these retailers, or whether it's just there's so many brands out there and there's so much noise. It's incredibly difficult. And I would say cannabis is quite unique, and I would say it's a little bit more challenging in that it is a new industry. But I always say no is the second best answer. Like I'd rather hear no than I want to hear yes, then I want to hear no, then I want to hear silence or anything else or maybe or whatever, because the timing's got to be right, your heart's got to be in it. Your team has got to be ready in terms of software, to utilize a product like ours. So it's very difficult, and thankfully we're kind of getting out of the build the plane as we fly it, which I have been hearing all the time. Up until recently, I haven't been hearing it as much, but it's just a rocky road with the regulations changing and everything that these operators are going through. It's a grind for them, and it's a grind for the salespeople selling into them for sure.
It's a particular struggle. Just nitty gritty. Working for a software company involved in data, being involved in sales. Would you say you're quite data driven from a sales perspective? Do you use that, or do you a real cowboy, fly by wire, maverick sort of? Or do you really do you use that data that's out there that is very much a part, I suppose, of the product you're selling, amongst other things?
Yeah, a little bit of both. We're getting better about data. What our KPIs are, what our metrics are, what our goals are, and how we want to get there. It is quite challenging, no doubt about it. But yeah, no, we're getting better at it, and we definitely use data. Just so that we can measure and then improve. So it's all about that optimization, and we practice with what we preach, across the board. Whether it's our development team, our marketing team, customer success, account management, so on and so forth. We are very data driven, where we want it recorded and we want to figure out how to improve.
Very cool. I was going to ask, I don't want to say traditional software sales because there's nothing traditional about it, but I guess in more kind of, if we look at software, if you were kind of going into a bid or something, or I'm sort of drawing on my experience working for working with companies like Red Hat and things like that. And I know that they have very kind of aggressive ways of selling, and it's very much like, what can we beat the competition on in terms of point? How do we kind of get those C-suite level conversations and things? It's a very considered sale. They have teams dedicated to doing that, and it's really fascinating. If you're coming into cannabis and you don't have do you have competition, outright competition, that you're trying to steal market share from, or is it really just you're coming into it, these guys have got nothing, you're literally trying to bring a whole system, a whole way of working that's new to them, or do you have a little bit of both when it comes to that type of sale?
Yeah, a little bit of both, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. We've done a lot of competitive replacements over the past 18 months. So, kind of leveraging that second mover advantage where the operator has implemented something or tried to make a different system or a competitor system work, and it doesn't. So we've seen a lot of that, and that's helped us out, where the operator then knows, they know what they don't know. They know kind of what they can't do, and they know what they're looking for, and it's easy for us to display what our product can do, and that helps us out. There are obviously a lot of pre-license or operators that are applying for a license, and then they start kicking the tires and they want to know what your product can do, yet they might not ever be operational. So it's, that's a little bit of a challenge as well. But honestly, we try to be ridiculously honest in that there are a lot of software companies that have overpromised and underdelivered, and then it doesn't end up working out in the end. And whether it's, I hear operators and these are CEOs, COOs, et cetera, say take some of the blame for that part of it was our team not adopting and not utilizing the software. And then, sometimes it's the product itself that the salesperson says it can do things that it can't. Or the operation later discovers they want to do things that the software can't do. And so it really makes for a unique sales process, and that you're not just talking about what you're doing right now, but you're also talking about the operator wants to do 3, 5, or licensed producer wants to do 3, 5, 10 years from now. So it's quite challenging. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no. But on that note, when it comes to like MSOs, particularly in the US, I mean, are you dealing with the fact that, federal legalization, will it completely disrupt what you're doing, or will it be more of an opportunity to kind of standardize some of the software rather than kind of do something custom each time? Or do you just not, it remains to be seen, I guess, to some extent, what impact that will have. But how do you guys thinking about that? I'm just curious.
I think it'll help in terms of national standards and, for production, or national standards for traceability or tracking. In Canada, you're filling out CTS reports on a monthly basis. In the US, in some states, you've got to report in a metric. In other states, you've got to report in a BioTrack. In some states, you've got a homegrown system, such as Washington, where you're, uploading data. And that's a real challenge. And we found that a lot of the seed to sale software, which we don't consider ourselves, has focused on those APIs of the individual state reporting requirements. And as such, have been distracted from the actual operating KPIs that producers need to be focused on or want to be focused on. And instead, which rightly so, in order to maintain their license status, they're reporting, they're focused on kind of how they efficiently report into, the state required reporting bodies.
Now, you have the excellent title of Head of International Sales. Now, we met in Berlin, so there's obviously some excitement around Germany, and you guys are spreading out and looking into new markets. Now, first part of a two-part question: which place are you most excited about, or do you think it's probably going to roll out relatively soon from what you've seen, what you've heard? And this can be complete hearsay. I won't hold you to anything. And then on the other side of it, how can the places that currently don't have legal markets, particularly recreational, how can they prepare for those, and how does either software or systems play a part in that?
Yeah. So first part, I don't think anywhere is going to roll out soon. I think the headlines seem to be quite rosy, yet, in Germany being a huge market, and yet there are EU treaties and kind of...
saw the article you posted about. It's curious, that one. And it made me think, well, actually, being British and out the EU, does that give us more of an open book to kind of, I don't know, it's a question, one of the few benefits of Brexit. I don't know, who knows, but again, it comes down to the government. But anyway, sorry, please.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I think it's going to be longer than people imagine. We're excited about Australia, we're excited about South America, and of course, we are excited about Europe as well. There's some interesting, countries that are producing, and the excitement there is specifically around the GMP, the good manufacturing practices, or the good agricultural collection practices that really kind of enable the import and export of cannabis. And we're working with a number of GMP certified facilities. Our software has been GMP validated. So that's really exciting for us. In terms of, preparing for recreational legalization, I would advise operators to focus on the consumer side and consumer data. So trying to go maybe not direct to consumer, but collecting as much consumer data as possible so that you have more information on your audience, and then you can market to them down the road. Now, what the retail experience looks like, whether that is direct to consumer, whether, obviously you want to go to a pharmacy, or perhaps it's, over the counter as it's called here in the States at a, pharmacy where you don't need a prescription from a doctor. What that looks like, who knows? But obviously here in California, where, I can call up and have cannabis delivered to my door in 10, 15 minutes in just about any form factor you want to consume it. It's a unique environment, but I think the guys that are doing well is, establishing that brand and collecting the consumer data. I can't tell you how many times, and I do it with almost every package that I open up, I'm scanning that QR code And it's amazing how many times it goes to a shit landing page. I mean, excuse my language, but it's like, what's going on here? I mean, this is a huge opportunity. And, some go direct to lab testing results. Some go to a branded page with information about the product or perhaps where it came from. But, I'm really fascinated by what that experience is like. And, I think for somebody preparing for a recreational legal market should be thinking about collecting that consumer data or establishing a tight connection with their consumers to work on making them loyal customers.
No, it's really interesting because I think, again, from what we do, from the content marketing perspective, it's, here in the UK, the idea, having a medicinal market and no kind of sign of recreational is kind of like, well, the way to kind of get people's attention is to kind of educate them and keep kind of talking, there needs to be the element of advocacy and talking about sort of, patient stories and just kind of paving the way for everyone rather than kind of doubling down on the sort of brand experience. But I guess in more mature markets, like in the US, like in California, Colorado, it's kind of like that feels like, that's the time to do that. But I think it's interesting you're saying that, if companies still have an opportunity to build a brand, even when they're not, in a legal adult recreational use market, there's still an opportunity to kind of get a foothold in there. I think companies like Cookie seem to be doing that pretty well. Again, the brand just seems to be, even if they're not selling products, it's like, selling caps, they're selling T-shirts. They've got, Burner as the go-to guy, the first cannabis billion, he's all over the place, and and that's like, well, it has that cachet, doesn't it? But it's interesting that you're saying that, I think other companies should be starting thinking those sort of terms to really make an impact in new markets.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, love them or hate them, Cookies is doing something right. No doubt about it. And funny story about that. A couple of years ago, when I was working for another software company, I was actually going kind of door to door up in Santa Rosa, where their headquarters are, and I think Burner might live somewhere in that area, or perhaps Sacramento. But anyway, I was up there and kind of rapped on the door, and was chatting an employee up and got the name of the person that I should be talking to, and which I do not recommend to any salesperson to be going door to door, incredibly efficient and not necessary. But anyway, push came to shove, and I think I had a meeting up there, and then I kind of stopped by some neighboring manufacturing facilities. So I leave, and I'm in the parking lot kind of figuring out where I'm going next, and this black SUV pulls up, and out pops Burner, and I'm sitting in the car, and I totally froze, and I'm like, oh my God, get out of the car and go start talking to him about the operations and who I should talk to and how I can improve it, and et cetera, et cetera. And I totally froze, and I did not get out of my car. I waved to him. He kind of like waved back, and I'm like, I mean, it was such a rookie move, and it's one of the very few that I've made in the cannabis industry.
Oh man.
That's my Burner story.
That's a great one. I love it.
No, that's good. But he's starstruck, but again, it's kind of like, the impact of someone, like him in the industry, it's starting to filter through, and that is just evidence of that. But I know what you mean. It's like, damn, we got the CEO. Hi.
I mean, whereas in a past life, I was calling on ESPN here in the States, and I found out this VP that I wanted to talk to, I found out where he had lunch, where he'd like to have lunch a lot of times. And sure enough, I went there and kind of a little bit stocky, but, I had lunch there a few times. And sure enough, on the third time he was there, and went up and sat next to him briefly and started chatting him up, and ended up getting some good business out of that. So you have to do it.
Well, no, that's the kind of old school sales play, and it's nice to hear that it works, and it does. And as much as it's easy to say it's a bit, but it's people talking to people, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's like having meaningful conversations about we get where you're coming from, you get where you're coming from. When there's an opportunity, we'll have another discussion about something more commercial, and it's like, okay, well, and that's the kind of basis, and it's that kind of what we were talking about, community earlier a little bit, and what it's about. Everyone kind of lifting each other up, and without that kind of hard sales edge to it until it's necessary. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, otherwise we're just kind of building relationships, and that, and that's kind of one of the things I always like about the cannabis sector. You've got lots of people coming from different aspects of different industries and, trying to find a sort of common ground, but everyone's always very united in the one thing that they love the product in whatever form it is, or they feel strongly enough about the impact of what it's doing to kind of support it. And, that really shines through, I always think. And I think that's great. I really, really do. But
Yeah. You got to empathize with others. It's incredibly challenging, especially here in the States. And you got to be honest too. It's like, I'm looking to help you out. If my product's not good for you, that's fine. Can I share some knowledge? Can I tell you what we've seen? Can you if you want to ask me any questions, I've got some questions for you. What are you struggling with? Like, maybe I can make an introduction to somebody that I know. So yeah, it's good. But yeah, at the end of the day, Dave, that's a great point to remember that, everyone's kind of in it to see the plant succeed as an alternative to all these, addictive pharmaceuticals that are out there. And, it's easy to kind of unite around that.
100%. No, cool. So I got, I don't know if you've got any other question, but I have a final question. But anything else from you?
No, please. If you've got one pocketed, by all means.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to say. So, to what extent do you agree with this statement, Brian, as a kind of salesman? Should you always be closing?
100% no.
Okay.
You should always be trying to close.
Always be trying to close. Okay.
So ABTC, but
yeah, okay.
If it's not a good fit, you got to quickly back off. I mean, I don't want to waste my time. If you're not ready, if now is not a good time, so be it. The like forceful sales or creating a sense of urgency. Of course, it has to be done. If you're not collecting the data right now and your team is slowed down, there are opportunity costs to not doing anything about it. And they could be extreme and they could even put you under eventually. But, I can easily spin it around and say, if you want to win, if you want your company to win, you've got to use tools like this. But if you guys aren't ready to adopt them, no problem. Let me know when you are. There's no shame in that, no problem there. And, thankfully we've got a real supportive executive team that understands that at Elevated Signals. And, it's been a real pleasure to be a part of the team, but you should try to always be closing, but you're not always going to be closing. And the pushy sales folks come out real quick that are trying to do that, to force them. We're pegging in the round hole.
That's it. No, I think there is definitely, like you say, an honesty around it that you have to kind of accept and just be like, well, we know it's great. If you don't believe us, well, come back in 6 months once you've tried the other stuff and here we are. No shame. We welcome you with open arms, thing, isn't it? But no, I know what you're saying. It's cool.
It's happened time and time again. There are Canadian LPs knocking on our door that we've been talking to for a couple of years, and the headlines right now aren't so pretty with how those LPs are performing. Yet the guys that we've been working with for years, they're on the other side of the coin doing quite well, and their financials reflect that. So I'll leave you with that one. It's not the right time. It's not the right time.
That's it. No, cool. Thank you so much, Brian. It's been a real education. I think there's some stuff we can definitely take away in our own efforts. But no, it's very interesting. And we'll probably see you in Vegas, I'm hoping.
That would be outstanding.
Wicked.
Look forward to seeing you guys there.
Most
brilliant. Alrighty. Well, thanks again. And we'll catch up with you soon.
Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Have a good one.